There is a question almost no one asks out loud, a question that echoes in ancient stone corridors and in the silent halls of modern churches. What if the most disturbing prophecy in the Bible is not misunderstood, but intentionally ignored? What if the mystery was never meant to comfort us, but to confront us? For centuries, believers have gathered under stained glass windows, listening to familiar stories. Yet buried inside Scripture, hidden in plain sight, is a warning so unsettling that it rarely makes it to the pulpit. Why? We live in an age of information, hyperconnectivity, and constant noise. Artificial intelligence is reshaping reality. Governments speak of global unity. Economies move like fragile glass towers, and at the same time, church attendance declines. Sermons grow softer, and difficult passages quietly disappear from discussion. Is this coincidence or pattern? Because long before satellites orbited the Earth and digital currencies existed, ancient writers described a time when truth would be diluted, power centralized, and faith tested not by persecution alone, but by deception. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul wrote about something he called the mystery of lawlessness in the book of Second Thessalonians. He described a force already at work in his time, hidden, restrained, waiting for a moment of revelation. Not chaos in the streets, not open rebellion, but something subtler. A system, a mindset, a gradual erosion. Paul warned of a figure who would exalt himself, who would sit in the place of God, presenting illusion as truth. Many interpret this symbolically. Others see it as literal, but almost all agree on one thing. Deception would define the era. Then there is the final book of the Bible, Book of Revelation, filled with beasts, horns, crowns, and cryptic numbers. For generations, these images were treated as distant metaphors. Yet Revelation speaks repeatedly about a global structure of influence, about commerce controlled by allegiance, about a mark tied to buying and selling. In ancient Rome, such ideas sounded impossible. Today, in a world of biometric IDs and digital transactions, they sound familiar. Is this the fulfillment, or simply another echo in a repeating cycle of history? History itself gives us clues. Empires rise, promising order and stability. They centralize authority. They standardize currency. They merge religion and politics. Ancient Rome did it. Later, European powers mirrored it. Each time, a dominant system claimed moral legitimacy while consolidating control. The Church, at different points in history, sometimes resisted that power. At other times, it aligned with it. This tension between spiritual truth and institutional survival is not new. It is ancient, and it is uncomfortable. Here is the part rarely explored in Sunday sermons. The possibility that the greatest threat described in prophecy does not emerge from outside the church, but from within structures that claim to represent it. Jesus himself warned of false prophets rising from among the faithful. Not obvious villains, convincing voices, charismatic leaders, systems that appear righteous, while slowly redefining truth. Over time, standards shift. Language softens. Hard teachings become optional, and the line between sacred conviction and cultural approval begins to blur. Now consider the modern world. Global organizations coordinate economic policy. Technology companies influence thought patterns. Algorithms shape what billions of people see and believe. Digital identity systems expand. Financial transactions become traceable, programmable, controllable. In isolation, each development seems practical, efficient, even beneficial. But prophecy never described evil as obvious at first glance. It described something persuasive, logical, incremental. A structure people would accept willingly because it promised safety. The mystery the church rarely addresses is not about predicting dates or identifying a single villain. It is about recognizing patterns. It is about understanding that spiritual compromise often begins subtly, through convenience and fear. When faith becomes comfortable, when difficult truths are avoided to maintain attendance, when moral clarity bends to cultural trends, something shifts beneath the surface. And once a foundation shifts, the structure above it eventually follows. Look again at Paul's warning about the man of lawlessness. He said many would follow the deception because they refused to love the truth, not because they lacked intelligence, not because evidence was absent, but because truth demands sacrifice. It demands courage. It demands standing apart from dominant narratives. In every generation, that has been costly. In ours, it may be more complex than ever before. This is the revelation hidden in plain sight. Prophecy is less about fear of the future and more about discernment in the present. The beasts and symbols represent systems of power that repeat throughout history, each iteration more sophisticated than the last. Technology accelerates their reach. Media amplifies their voice, and spiritual apathy lowers resistance. The church speaks often about hope, forgiveness, and blessing. These are real. They are foundational. But the warnings about deception, conformity, and centralized control are equally present in Scripture. Ignoring half the message does not erase it. So why is this mystery avoided? Perhaps because it challenges institutions. Perhaps because it forces uncomfortable reflection. Perhaps because it suggests that vigilance must begin not with pointing outward at enemies, but inward at complacency. It asks believers to measure every alliance, every innovation, every cultural shift against enduring principles rather than temporary advantage. None of this proves that any single modern system is the final fulfillment of ancient prophecy. History cautions. Conclusions. Many generations believed they stood at the edge of the end, yet the patterns remain consistent. Consolidation of power, moral confusion, charismatic authority, economic leverage, and a population gradually conditioned to trade autonomy for security. The Bible describes these dynamics not as myth, but as warning. The future of humanity may not hinge on dramatic apocalyptic events appearing overnight. It may unfold through steady normalization of control, through narratives that redefine good and evil, through spiritual institutions choosing relevance over conviction. The question is not whether prophecy exists. It does. The question is whether we recognize its rhythm when it echoes through our own time. If the mystery of lawlessness was already at work 2,000 years ago, how much more refined might it be now? If deception once required physical presence, what does it look like in an age where influence travels at the speed of light? And if faith communities remain silent about the hardest warnings in Scripture, who will prepare people to discern truth from illusion? This is not a call to panic. It is a call to awareness, to examine history, to read Scripture fully, not selectively, to understand that prophecy was never written to entertain curiosity, but to sharpen perception, because the greatest danger is not open persecution. It is subtle transformation. It is truth diluted slowly enough that few notice the change. Somewhere between ancient parchment and modern code lies the same human struggle. Power, belief, control, freedom. The symbols may evolve, but the conflict remains. And perhaps the mystery the church rarely talks about is this. The final test may not be about surviving chaos, but about recognizing deception while it still looks reasonable. As the world accelerates toward deeper integration, as technology weaves itself into every transaction and every thought stream, the ancient warnings feel less like distant allegory and more like a mirror. Not a prediction etched in stone with a calendar date attached, but a pattern repeating with increasing precision. The signal is not loud. It does not shout from mountaintops. It whispers through history, through Scripture, through the headlines of our own time. The question is whether we are listening. Because if the mystery has always been at work, then the moment of revelation will not begin with surprise. It will begin with recognition. And recognition changes everything. This has been your signal.